There is a tendency now for us to almost personify the tools that we're working with and also give them this esteem that takes away from our own contributions. 172 job applications I applied for. And I got 3 responses. So I have beef, right, with people in HR because of your ATS system. And I only came to hear about ATS when I started working with you. I didn't know. I was applying and responding to these job descriptions from the bottom of my heart.
AI came in to beat ATS. Now we need AI to beat AI.
Detect AI.
To
right.
detect AI. That's what's happening. Hello everyone, thank you for joining me today on Human Career Insights. My guest today is Elizabeth Mangami, visionary nonprofit leader with nearly 20 years of experience in resource mobilization, program design, and strategic partnership management. She's originally from Bulawayo, Zimbabwe. Lizz is now based in Chicago. She's the founder of Vanavevhu, Children of the Soil, a youth-led social enterprise in Zimbabwe, and the driving force behind NDISU, a groundbreaking fundraising advisory firm dedicated to empowering nonprofits to achieve meaningful impact. Who first joined me in the second episode, AI and the Future of Work. She's here today in person, and I am so glad to have her. Lizz, welcome back to Human Career Insights.
Hi, Mache. It's good to see you, and I'm glad to be here and in person this time.
Yeah, the last time we met, we were talking about AI and the future of work. And barely a year later, we are in the future.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
So, yeah, the last time we spoke, you said you were not afraid of automation. And we are now in this AI boom, or that's what some people are calling it. Where are you now with this future of work?
Right. I'm glad that you've asked me this question, because I think where I want to start off is by just sort of level setting with the way I think about it, right? Everybody is talking about AI, but I think what we are mostly talking about are what we are calling large learning models, right? And I think that there is a tendency now for us to almost personify the tools that we're working with and also give them this esteem that takes away from our own contributions of it. So I think not a lot has changed in terms of my positioning. I still see these things as tools that just make my work life, a lot easier and makes me more efficient in the levels of productivity that I have to engage with.
A rose by any other name smells the same.
AI, if you will.
LLM.
Right, but I mean, not to get into the semantics of it, but even AI, what does AI stand for? Artificial intelligence, right? So I think, I don't know, I feel as though in my spaces where I am, I sense a lot of anxious tension around an uncertainty and vulnerability. And so I think I try and sort of, by playing around with the language in the way that I do and sort of like trying to dispel the myth and also just get people relaxed in terms of thinking of their own autonomy and control in how you can utilize these automations, these AI tools, because I think, as we've prepared for this conversation, we've spoken a lot about the anxiety that people are feeling, the vulnerabilities, feeling as though, you could be out of work. And I think there is a sense that people feel like they need more access, they need to know about all these tools. But again, I like you hear me, I call it a tool. It's something that is using your talents, you are using it to amplify your talents. And but anyway, you have questions.
Yes, the first question is the practicality of these tools.
Mm-hmm.
How are you using them? Like, there's been a boom, right? There's a lot of them. There's Gemini, there's Claude, there's Grok, there's ChatGPT. How are you using them? I know in our last conversation we spoke about your expertise are in fundraising, they're in donor strategy, and we spoke about a particular app that you were using.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to get into the weeds of how practically are you using these tools, and what have you found most useful in your donor funding sphere?
Right. Okay, so I think what I want to do too is sort of like level set what I do. Most of my work is around helping organizations build strategy for their fundraising, make their fundraising make sense, and in particular focusing on diversifying revenue streams. So I don't think that I am the person who's like taken up a lot of tools. I use in particular one, ChatGPT, and how I typically use it is when I meet with a prospective client before they become a client. I spend a lot of time in what I call discovery. So I'm taking a lot of notes, I'm listening in for a lot of conversation. Zoom these days, which is one of the tools I use for my meetings, does meeting summaries and builds up notes from the conversations that I had. So the main way that I'm using an AI tool is to synthesize these meetings and these complex ideas. I often still, I had it here, but I've put it away. I still write notes, right? So I like to make a joke about myself that I am a Xennial, and I think we've talked about this before, right? That I'm both analog and digital, right? My formative years of school were writing notes, and then I went into the world of university and work, and a computer became something I had to learn. So for my sort of like retaining the things that I'm hearing and learning when I'm in conversation with clients, I have to write it down. And then I often get a transcript that comes from my, meeting summary that comes from Zoom. And so what I do with my LLM is I will take my notes, what I've written, I then type up, and the meeting summary, and I ask it to synthesize that to help me pull out the themes that I'm identifying, and then it just really starts to help me in terms of crafting a proposal. Often when I'm talking to clients, what I'm doing is very sort of like big picture ideas for them, right? Often my proposal is so what I do to sort of add a little more context. I do or I focus, or my expertise is in major gifts fundraising, which is basically getting gifts or donations that are $10,000 or more. It takes a lot of work to try and get a gift of that size and larger, and often in our industry we say it takes you about 12 to 18 months to convert a prospect into an actual donation. So my proposal based on that model is often an engagement with NDISU, an engagement with Lizz is going to be about 12 to 18 months. And there's a myriad of things that need to happen in those 12 to 18 months. So I'm also producing very large and long proposals. And I'm also having to produce them on my own. Largely, Vanile and I work together, but we're still a small team. And so so these tools help me to be able to do these big proposals in a shorter amount of time. And also, the way I've trained my tool is to ask it to work with me as my own strategy consultant. So I get asked questions, it pushes me to think of different things. I am not a fan, for example, of institutional giving. So I tend to shy away from anything that requires an organization to write grants. So it compels me, because sometimes a grant is the quickest way to get a 10,000 plus gift or donation. So it pushes me to figure out the way to integrate that. And a lot of nonprofit, especially those that are based in the continent or on the continent of Africa, which is where I really want to find my clients, are used to the grant model, right? They want to be able to apply for grants. So in order to be competitive and also, help coach people toward revenue diversification and looking at individual giving, I have to integrate the stuff that I don't like. So I find that the tools help me to sort of like keep that as part of the offering, right? Because I'm still trying to get the business. So once you give me the business, then I can bully you into doing what I think is best for you. But so meeting, synthesizing, helping me with complex thoughts. As you can tell, right, it's always a very sort of like meandering answer. So I have to produce newsletters and blogs as part of my business development and keeping people in touch with what I'm thinking when NDISU is growing. So again, I will sort of, verbal diarrhea into the tool. I'm thinking of this idea. I'm thinking of capitalism. I'm thinking of patriarchy. I'm thinking of feminism. I'm thinking of climate justice. I'm thinking about how does that help an international school in Kenya? How do I sort of like take all my ideas and all the parts of me and put it into a blog that's going to be useful, right? I think about one of the blogs that I wrote was about and everything for me is very subjective. So I was in my apartment and I don't know what I was doing, but suddenly in my line of vision was a book that was my late father's book. And it was a collection of essays by Che Guevara. And when I opened the book, it opened to a place where my dad had cut out a job ad, and using a ruler to do that, and it had placed it in the chapter that was about labor relations.
Oh wow!
So where my mind goes is like, okay, so my dad being one of those, few black people who were enrolled at the University of Rhodesia, studied a bachelor's in social work. And then he ended up being a personnel manager in a system that was not necessarily made for people that looked like him, especially when you're thinking it's in Rhodesia. And so then that led me to thoughts about the work that I do now and sort of drawing parallels. And it was a very sort of like long, rambly thing that I wrote, and then I put it into the tool, and it helped just sort of organize the thoughts, take out what might not be interesting or relevant. So I think there is definitely a great value for someone like me in the tools. And I'm actually realizing that I don't remember what the question was. But yeah, so I think for me, I think you asked how I use it. So that's kind of like how I have been using these tools, is to kind of like make my work life easier and also allow myself to be myself in terms of just how expansive my mind is and how I engage with my work and how subjective it is and how I bring everything from a clipping and Che Guevara and a deceased father and my theoretical and ideological leanings, but that then becomes a blog that is something that talks about me, my grounding, where I come from, but also explains how I come to do the work that I do and why I'm passionate about fundraising, if you will, but also just helping organizations that are trying to, in many ways, especially on the continent, reverse the impacts of colonialism, of imperialism, or improve people's lives after the fact, by using the tools and the skill set that I have, right? And just helping them figure it out. And it's all interconnected. So, yeah.
Yeah, very interconnected. And I wonder how your dad would have reacted. Okay, the cutout, the paper, and now where HR managers are complaining, they're like struggling with the use or the irresponsible use, I would say, of people particularly in recruitment.
Yeah.
We are hearing of people that are okay. There's the general. I'm just gonna stick my CV in ChatGPT. ChatGPT apply for me, no review, nothing. I take what ChatGPT has done and I send it through. And firstly, they're getting a lot of that,
right?
And the AI is beating the ATS because ATS is looking for keywords. AI is very smart. It will spit out those keywords, and what they are finding is that they are not getting the people that are qualified or the people that have the necessary experience. They are getting the people that have access to ChatGPT, and that it's we go down a rabbit hole because that then means it's a certain type of people, maybe in different parts of the world that have this access. But access is another issue. So we're talking about the irresponsible use of AI. And they're also finding in actual interviews. I attended a seminar the other day, and HR managers were talking about and recruiters were talking about how they are doing an interview and someone is actually using ChatGPT or Claude or whatever it is to answer the interview questions. So, they'll do the network, because we have, we now have a lot of remote interviewing, a lot of virtual interviewing. So they'll do a lot of crinkle, the network is giving me problems sort of thing. And meanwhile, they're typing in the question to ChatGPT. Right. And then the next thing, here the recruiter gets ChatGPT answer, not Lizz or Bache answer, but ChatGPT is doing this interview. So there's a lot of that going on.
And aren't you all looking for innovation when I say you, right? Because you're an HR person, but aren't you seeking innovation when somebody applies for a job? Is that not a skill set?
Well, it's a lot of gymnastics, isn't it?
Yeah. And I mean, sorry, I'm cutting you off before you get to your question. But go ahead.
And it becomes a problem in terms of authenticity, in terms of generally, I'm getting the same things. And I want to tie that back to grant proposals. If everybody is using ChatGPT to do their grant proposals, where is the authenticity? How has that shaped, or has it in any way changed the donor space? How has it in any way changed the grant finding space?
So I have a few things ways that I want to answer your question, and I always sort of have to ground the fact that I'm going to be contrarian, and I'm always going to be steeped in resistance, because when you were speaking about HR, people in culture, people in talent, recruiters, etc., whatever the new names are for personnel, are talking about this frustration, right? That people are just using these systems to bypass the ATS. But we had to do that.
Yes.
I remember a year in 2016 when I was running my little NGO and things were not going well and I was not adequately remunerated. I spent a year, was it 2016? Yeah, it was 2016 I did. Yeah, I spent a year applying for jobs. 172 job applications I applied for. And I got 3 responses. One of them, I went far in the process, but I didn't make it into, I think they maybe had 4 rounds, so I didn't make it past the second round. The second one was somebody, because of how my resume reads, was just curious.
Yeah.
It was very clear that they just wanted to A, am I real? And B, why am I applying for the job that I was applying for?
Yeah.
And then the other one cancelled as I was on my way to the interview. And at the time, I had
cancelled the interview.
Yeah,
when you were on your way
on
to
my
the
way
interview.
to the interview. So I have beef, right, with people in HR because of your ATS system. And I only came to hear about ATS when I started working with you. I didn't know. I was applying and responding to these job descriptions from the bottom of my heart.
Yes.
As somebody who really wanted to go into this job and show up. So I think it's also, one of my nieces likes to go, well, the tables have turned. Because, you know, we have had a lot of gatekeeping. We, the workers, have had a lot of gatekeeping around jobs that we were qualified, in my case, overly qualified for. But these systems that have no thought of, you know, there's no humanity to them.
Yes.
Your ATS systems would spit us out. Comes your LLM, comes your ChatGPT, and now that's the bit of an equalizer. So now you kind of have to be inundated with 3,000 applications for a job because at some point, and I think that's where I always say to you, I always go to root cause, right? Like we have to think about the power dynamic.
Yes.
It was all well and good when you guys had the ATS, and I keep saying you guys, but you know, when the HR people had the ATS to gatekeep, but now when we are using the thing to sort of like, you know, resist and subvert, you're having frustration conversations at your conferences. That's, again, you know, where I'm always like, this is where I would love for us, when these moments come, for us to stop and remember that these are tools that we created.
Yes.
Right? And so how are we just making sure that there is our own human intervention of rationale and how these tools work. And then about grant writing.
Yes.
Again, Liz is going to be contrarian about these things. Why are these funders still requiring these grant applications that require the people who are busy doing the work to try and use these tools so as that they can get through what are some really ridiculous requirements when people put together these grant applications? You either want to give the money or you don't. This is my frustration with institutional giving, because you have somebody who is on the ground solving social ill, or trying to, right? Because the other thing is that we can't solve these things because the money is being withheld, because we have to jump through all these hoops. I don't even know if people still use log frames, but I remember that I sort of stopped when I had to sort of engage with these very complicated grant applications. You have to wait to be invited to apply, right? So what are people supposed to do? People are trying to, you know, do the work on the ground. A tool comes that helps. I'm going to use that tool.
Yeah.
Quality is subjective. about. So I'm excited because at the moment I'm working, with an organization that is really living the idea of trust-based philanthropy. There is no ask. There's actually, because I actually think what this organization does is that there's a respect for the person on the ground. There's a respect for the movement leaders. There's a respect for the people who have, because sometimes when somebody comes across an organization that can apply for a grant, that organization has been working with the little resources that they have before this foundation even thought, you can apply for a grant. So I think that there is definitely an opportunity for, whether it's the HR people, whether it's the, funders that require a grant application, to maybe stop and think about their processes, right? Rather than be sort of accusatory and also always assuming malintent.
Yes.
People are just trying to survive. And these tools are here that can help, right? I mean, it becomes a joke and everything, right? That there's for example, people in Asian country X are using deep fakes to interview for jobs. But that's also because they faced a lot of prejudice.
Yes.
And they know that with their accent, the person listening to them, because they've had this happen several times, is not really going to hear what they're saying.
Yes.
They're going to listen, or is it they're not going to listen and hear anyway? You know what I mean? English is a second language. But
or third.
Or third or fourth, right? So I again, as somebody who's about resistance and shifting power dynamic, I'm like, you eventually need to do the job.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
You eventually need to do the job. But if you can get through the gates that were preventing you from getting there, please shine when you get there, right? But I also think my challenge would be, whether it's a people, culture and talent department, director of human resources, or it's a program officer at a foundation that is tired of getting poorly written grant applications, or even the organization that is now using it to apply for every grant on the planet, right? I want people to maybe just stop and think about their own process and their why, and hopefully that kind of helps you as a human being use your rationale to reset and think about not only the most utilitarian but the most fair use of the tool. But I think there's enough blame all round
to go around,
right? Especially with that, I remember when you and I started working together, and you told me about this ATS system, and thinking the way I had been trained, because when I was now seriously applying for jobs, I'd been out of the conventional world of work for a while, right? And so I was applying for jobs the way the last I had applied for a job before I started my NGO was 2009. So I remember that you get the job description, you look at your CV, you look at the mission, you speak to the mission, there was this phrase that we had, and I gotten it from my friends who were working at Deloitte and places like that, because I love corporate speak. I have to say that is the one thing that I bring into the nonprofit space, that people just look at me when I'm like, shall we circle back? You need to sunset that. I love corporate speak. So I would use all these phrases, and then you were like, girl, this is not how we apply for jobs anymore.
Yeah, we have to look at those keywords. And, your answer to the first question, I'm going to say that I totally agree with you. And in that particular setting, I was that one person that said, but hey, we started it all with requiring, with the ATS, requiring keywords. And people said, hey, this is what they want. This is what we're gonna give them.
What they want.
And we have the tools now. We're gonna use those tools to beat you at your own game. It's just the way it is. So now we've gone full circle now, because what happened was ATS, AI came in to beat ATS. Now we need AI to beat AI.
Detect AI.
To detect AI. That's what's happening. They're asking, we're looking for AI
Sounds
to
like
detect
I should
AI.
be like placing bets now on these fights. Who's gonna win?
Let's circle back, Liz, to what you spoke about a little bit earlier about the environmental impact of this whole AI boom and our responsible use, intentional use of these AI tools when we know this environmental impact. Tell me about that impact, the values that you say to me you're grappling.
Yeah, I mean, so the first time that I sort of like had a moment of was, doom scrolling on Instagram, and
Yes.
somebody had posted that asking ChatGPT to write an email for you that you could have easily written for yourself is the equivalent of buying a plastic bottle of plastic bottle of water, opening it and pouring it onto concrete, right? So for me, that was definitely something that sort of like stopped me in my tracks. And so I did a little bit of research, and the research was damning, right, in terms of how much is used for these data centers, how much energy and natural resources is used. So energy as in the power, right, the electricity to keep these centers processing our data, and then the natural resources, the water that is needed to cool these centers. And as somebody who is steeped in sustainability, in the work that not only I've personally done, but work that I help other organizations move, I really was struck by that. And further the research will tell you that using please, right, around this personifying or anthropomorphizing of these things, that you are using more energy, right? It is, so I had to really start thinking about that. And so I became a little more intentional and ended up taking a short course in prompt engineering, right, which allowed me to sort of, when I prompt the tool, to be short and succinct, right, and to get to the point and to not sort of like meander. Is it easy to stay strict in how you prompt? No, it isn't. But at least I feel like I have a consciousness around it. And then beyond that, I had an opportunity to be involved in a festival that was being sponsored by a tech-based nonprofit, a foundation, and then you start thinking about where we come from, right? The African continent, and its direct benefit to technology as an industry, right? The minerals that are coming out of Africa are the ones that are creating the tools, the hardware that is required for us, especially us in the first world, in the West, global North. I never know what's the like politically correct one is. How that is not even benefiting. In fact, it's a detriment. You can read whoever you read. People will often talk about Africa's natural resources and raw materials being a curse almost, right? Because I think I said this to you yesterday as we were sort of preparing for this, is that it's almost bipolar how you end up, and not to sort of use people's real mental health challenges flippantly, but it becomes a real challenge, like you are struggling with this sort of like good and evil moment, because Zimbabwe recently has been celebrated for being the first African country to export processed lithium, right?
Yes. Yay.
I don't know where lithium comes from, mountains, the ground. I don't know where it comes from exactly. But immediately my thought was, oh, yes, decolonizing. But we can't feed our own people. We're so worried about extracting what's underneath the earth instead of actually farming above ground and keeping people healthy. So the continued extraction of the continent in a way that doesn't benefit the continent, and name the extraction. It used to be coal.
Yeah.
Right? And in large ways it still is. It's gold. It's diamonds.
Yeah.
But if you go and hand a starving person on the African continent a lump of coal, what does it do for them?
Yeah.
Right?
Not much.
Exactly. And so and then values misalignment, because the people, the larger than life characters that are behind these companies that make these tools are, especially when you're thinking about where we are in the US, are aligning themselves with policies, leadership that doesn't necessarily reflect that it has my and people who look like me's best interest at heart. Right? So you also have to grapple. I mean, I can't protest everything, right? But I do, for me, just the way I'm also wired, it's hard for me not to think about what it means for me to type on my MacBook, right? Because what makes up that MacBook is why we are saying free Congo every other day.
Yeah.
And somebody said to me, and I actually struggled because I upgraded my laptop last year, and I had to say, necessary evil to actually do it. But it was, do I need it? So do you need to upgrade your cell phone? Do we need to do these things? And can we actually boycott our way into equity? I don't know, right? But that's where from the environment to the values, that's where I really struggle with these tools. But I think there are ways, right? There are ways that we could do this ethically. But it doesn't, ethics is expensive. I don't know if that's actually the right way, but doing things ethically impacts people's bottom line. And unfortunately, the system that we're in is about amassing wealth at great speeds with very little concern to who it actually impacts as well. So keep using those tools, guys.
This episode is brought to you by Humor, the boutique career and leadership consultancy helping professionals get clear, get confident, and get hired. From CV writing and Clifton Strengths coaching to interview prep and leadership development, Humor is here to help you take the next step in your career. Visit humor.org, humhr.org to learn more. Thank you for bringing that in, bringing in the continent, bringing in the global south, because thank you to my community. I have a question for us that I want us to talk about today that came from one of our community, people in our community in the global south. So I'm going to read it out loud, and then I'm going to have a conversation about that. So Hazel, she actually says she doesn't mind. Hazel from South Africa sent us this question, and it was like, but these tools are not accessible to a greater population of women, from basic internet access to IT skills, right through to the cost of the platforms. Most of us have shifted to subscription models in USD, which is costly to sustain. We as Africans don't own the platforms, and cost and access is not catered for our market. I feel so left behind. The whole tech and AI world has been driven by the first world, and they have been prepared for it. We haven't. We don't even have enough systems. Our internet is not even accessible from a cost perspective, from an accessibility perspective, let alone being able to understand and use the tools. They are so advanced and we are so behind. We are being thrust into this AI world and we don't have an understanding of what we are doing. We are getting the drips and the crumbs of this. Maybe it was never designed for us. So
Okay, Hazel.
yeah, so when when she shared this with me, I was like, oh wow, because this was in response to one of the Bachia's takes that I do, and I had been talking about the using Claude and Artifact and blah blah blah, AI1, and I'm not like you, I use a lot, and I'll take what Claude says and take it to chat and say, hey chat, and oh yeah, I do use the hey please thank you and I'll move it from chat to Claude to and finally I'll review everything and I'll have Bachi, a combination of everything. So when I got this, I was like, I was speaking from a position of privilege, and that's something we need to be intentional about. And yeah, I want to get your response to Hazel's question for us.
Hazel's right, right? Like there's but we have to live in the world, right? And you have to live in the world in the context in which you live in.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I, have been thinking about is tech and digital sovereignty on the on the continent. And my response, because I can't really speak to a lot of individuals, I think she's right in what she's saying about the fact that some of these things are not designed with us in mind, right? We become the sort of like extra user of these things. And now there's starting to be some interest in different spaces around what our data, like our health data, for example. I would say that one of the things that I think we could do a lot more of on the continent is look for people who are offering African-based, African-grown solutions, right? I have to sort of like really declare my ignorance, but I know that at the beginning of the year there was some big thing that happened that was, and the fact that I can't even articulate it clearly, right?
Yeah.
Something happened where, I don't know, did Africa lay its own fiber optic? There was something that we did that sounded to me in like really like basic grade 0 layman's terms, like we were creating our own internet. There's something that so there are people, and I know I have two very close friends who have sort of like work in the sort of like technology, digital security, digital world. So I know little bits based on the work that they do. But I know that there are people people call, Kenya the Silicon Valley of Africa, good or bad. But there's got to be solutions that are coming out of Africa. But it's also up to us to be willing to utilize the African one, right?
Yes.
Because everybody's hearing about ChatGPT, Claude, but if I come to you and say I've got Clopas, are you going to use Clopas or do you want to use Claude? That's the other thing that we also have to think about, you know, the PR of the West, the PR of the global North. We definitely, in our own sort of like thinking and how we think about ourselves as Africans, we really need to try and see the value that we see in global North or Western things. We need to try and see the same value in the things that are homegrown, right? And even that word homegrown makes it sound like it's somehow deficient. So I, you know, like, so last year I've known these people for a while, but people I know have created what is in fundraising called, we people will talk about a CRM, right? Data, what is that? Customer relations management system. Like data and managing your data has become a thing, a big thing for us in any business, right? But people will pay lots of money to use Salesforce, right, as the Salesforce for nonprofit and the Salesforce for business. People will pay a lot of money for subscription to use Blackboard, which is like a big US fundraising sort of like CRM system. But I know two individuals who have created a tool that works like Blackboard, that works like Salesforce, but is being created in South Africa by people of Zambian descent, right? But we're working really, really hard to convince African organizations to have faith in that system. And maybe, and I'm not saying this, and I'm glad I haven't mentioned the name of the system. Maybe the African system is going to have bugs, but so does the Western created system, right? Like, we often have an expectation of perfection for things that are created at home, or maybe not an expectation of perfection. We don't have grace for the imperfections. And so I think that's really where we need to start. And even as we consume our social media, let's try and orient ourselves to things that are talking about what's happening on the continent. Because people are speaking about the tools that they are creating on the continent, but we're just not hearing about them because our algorithms are not leading us to that. So you also kind of need to be intentional, you know, while you're on TikTok, while you're on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn, search for things that are happening in Africa. All these tools now have a chatbot integrated into it. Ask it, what is an equivalent of XYZ that I can use that's made, and I keep talking about Africa, but the global South is impacted, right, by the inequalities that come from the fact that we have a global South and a global North. What is coming out of India, right? What is coming out of China? What are they making in South America? Like, finding tools that come, and what you'll find is that many of the people who create the things that we are using that are promoted as being born out of, you know, the specialness of the West are actually probably people from the global South themselves, right? But they just haven't found an opportunity to be brilliant in the global South, so they go to the global North. So I don't know if that answers Hazel's question, but I do think that the one thing that I can 100% agree with is that we were never the intended customer. We just have come along for the ride, and the way in which the continent is extracted from, but is still the most underdeveloped place technologically, digitally, tells you a lot.
I like that point you raised, that the homegrown solutions, we need to give them as much grace as we give the ones that are not homegrown. And also, I think there's a certain aspect of pride that we need to have pride in those solutions. I had a conversation the season that you came on with a company in Kenya, and they had created Simba AI, which was a chatbot. It was an large learning model. Yes, an LLM like ChatGPT. But I haven't heard anything from them. I haven't seen it growing, blowing up. I haven't seen it being used on the continent. I followed up a little bit, but not gotten back much feedback on what happened to Simba AI. So those local homegrown solutions do need the support. And then that will make it seem like, they're made by us, for us. Yeah. And it's funny, we're talking about food, isn't it? You talked about how growing on top, more like growing rather than the extraction.
Right.
That pride it's the same with the food.
Right.
Yeah. We spoke about our local fruits and our I think we talked about which is a local fruit.
Ni versus blueberries.
Yeah, versus blueberries. And that was a conversation I had earlier on this season as well. And I'm strongly convicted that is the way, that is the future, the long-term future way out of the problem that we currently have.
Yeah.
Long-term future. But what are the current practical solutions? And we spoke about free. They are free. There's 80% of ChatGPT is free, right? You can use those free solutions. So this is just to help Hazel. If you're watching Hazel, this is just in response to what can we do, and use the free solutions.
Right.
Yeah, you can do a lot with those free. Even Claude, they all have a free tier. And then the other solution that I had come up with, you must tell me what you think about this, is collaboration. Getting together, if we really need that subscription aspect, if we need co-work, for instance, because co-work in Claude is subscription. I think you only get co-work when you do the plus, you have to subscribe for it. If you need it for your work, or you think it will help your business grow faster, efficientize, get together as a group of women.
Yeah.
5 of you, it's $20, and say $4 each a month, and then we are going to spread out the usage. Maybe you get it for 1 week, I get it for 1 week. That was a solution that I thought about. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that collaboration and sort of like pooling resources in order to afford subscriptions is that I couldn't add no notes to that response. I think it's absolutely key. Again, because I'm me.
Yes.
Do you need it? And I'm saying that in full acknowledgement of my privilege, right? I can afford. Can I afford? Or I've made the choice to direct my resources to subscriptions for some of these tools. But there are a lot of open source resources in the world that are free, but also, how are you using it in your local context? I mean, if it does give you your competitive advantage, then, by all means. But are you responding to a world that is giving you subliminal pressure that you need a subscription to certain tools in order to be successful? That's just my question, because the world was worlding before any of these tools existed, right? And I'm not sitting here being, let's go back to the past. That's not what I'm saying. But I think sometimes, I just remember how people really struggled with subscriptions to Microsoft Suite. Like all those Microsoft products. And I just wonder sometimes,
Yeah.
about our need.
About the need.
Yeah.
Need versus want, or the desire that is there. Let me use it just because it's there.
And to keep up,
Yeah.
right?
And
There's
to keep
also
up.
that. So when you think about what Hazel said about these things that were never created for us, if they weren't created for us, why are we trying to keep up with them? That's,
And that is where we are going to pause part 1. We covered a lot: AI in hiring, the real cost of these tools, and Hazel's very practical question about whether these tools were ever built for us, or whether this is an integration question. Hazel herself suggested we put that directly to women entrepreneurs in the global south and hear their perspective. So, if you have a thought, a perspective, or a solution, leave a comment below. We want to hear from you. Part 2 is entrepreneurship, remote work, and something personal about coaching and what it takes to truly see yourself. Come back for it. If this conversation has been useful to you, share it with someone who needs. Subscribe here on YouTube or on Spotify or wherever you listen. And if you want to support the show and go deeper, you can find us on Patreon. All links are in the show notes. See you next time. Until then, stay inspired.